Morning.
Yep.
Hi, David. Good morning to all of you, and it's good to see you all again. And um, today we're going to start with the khandas. And I know you've all studied them and know them, but you're gonna, I hope, feel a really different kind of refreshment coming back to the khandas after dipping into the scales that we've dipped into. It's going to feel really different, the meaning of everything, kind of the richness of it. Um, if when I'm teaching Abhidhamma in a more in a shorter format or to less serious Abhidhamma students, I start with the khandas because they are on a scale that's easy to get into. They're kind of on a human experience scale. But scale is a huge issue in the Abhidhamma in the sense that there really is no sense of scale in here. Because everything is processed and everything is occurring in so many dimensions at the same time, there just really is not a sense of scale in the Abhidhamma. So like, I think as 21st century humans, I think of scale in terms of time and space. I feel like we have a more decent capacity when I think of space because the popular culture is exposed to enough scientific kind of terminology that we have a little, most of us have some taste of like quantum physics and talking about particles and waves and some we the Mars rover is in the news. We have, I think, a better capacity to stretch and shrink when we talk about distance and space and size and matter. When it comes to time, and I compare like our sensibility to the sensibility of the architects of the Abhidhamma, we're like babies. We're like little babies of comprehension. I think that, I don't know, exactly what it is, but we think of time in little rectangular blocks that are pretty small, and so just think about these adepts and those 17 steps of perception that, if we, by one measure neurologically, we could say maybe a chitta is about, let's just say, a 60th of a second, if we look at that brain picture that we were looking at the other day. So that's a 60th of a second, and a second, which we can barely comprehend, 60 of those happen. And somebody was sitting there going, that one turned to the object, that one got a piece of the object, that one's starting to investigate the object. I mean, somebody really could feel the difference between what the chittas were doing. That's how small the sense of time was. So you could say time was slowed down or however you look at it, but somebody was really able to get that. And then at the same time, I described that definition of the Mahakalpa a couple of weeks ago, where a Mahakalpa is, as long as it takes to wear down this 7-mile high granite mountain, swiping at it once every 100 years with a silk cloth. Just to have the imagination to say that is to be able to conceive of time in that big of a way. Another definition of a Mahakalpa, or maybe just a kalpa, or an eon anyways, is, this is in the commentary somewhere, it's believed that the average human lifespan goes up and down, which we know from information we have, like the average life expectancy is longer than it used to be. So one definition of an eon is the amount of time it takes for the average human lifespan to go from maybe 10 years to a few thousand and back. And nobody with just one of these little lifespans in this changing arc can perceive the whole arc. But it's believed that that could happen, and that's an eon. And then, you put 4 of those together into a Mahakalpa, and I think 20 into something else. And Bhante will talk about this a lot more when he talks about the cosmology, because then you get that's the sense of an eon, and that there are beings who are existing in what we would measure as 84,000 eons. So that is so mind-boggling, the sense of imagination, that basically, you know, I mean, we can call it an eon and we can translate it into units of measurement that we know, but it's basically sort of saying the units of measurement are irrelevant here. You could say that the devas could sit for 3 months without getting up and hear the whole Abhidhamma, but what's that 3 months mean? I don't know. It could be, like Bhante was saying, a flash of an eye for them. It could be, you know, in between deva meals. I don't know how it goes, you know, but it's just that the sense of scale is so wild in this whole thing. And then when you land on the khandas, you can relate to it. So it's kind of a good entry point, but I think that it's cooler now to look at them from the sense that we did look at chittas, and we did look at chaitasikas, and we did look at this emotional flow, and, you know, all of these things will make the khandas come to life in a different way. So to get down to them, I know I will be repeating things that a lot of you know, but just to kind of take it from the top, you know, the khandas are the short list of conditioned reality. They are the ingredients of human construction and clinging, because we do like our constructions. So it's kind of the same thing. What we construct, we overvalue. And these are all the ingredients. So remember that a khanda is not a composite of an object. And then here's a quote from Rupert Gethin, but rather the understanding of the nature of conditioned existence from the point of view of the experiencing subject. Us, okay. Another quantum physics point, that we are, of course, influencing what we observe. But this is a good point, that we're looking at the khandas from within the khandas. My favorite definition is from Red Pine, who's a Mahayana translator. This is in his commentary to the Lankavatara Sutta. Khandas are simply different ways of breaking down one's experience of awareness in search of a self. So yeah, Kyle likes Red Pine too. Yeah, he's a quite amazing character, his journeys, and his, there's a book about his traveling the yellow silk.
Zen baggage.
Yeah. Oh, that's that one. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's a very interesting character and great translator, I think, and commenter. I like his commentary to the Lankavatara. My favorite thing about it is that he puts the footnotes on the same page with where they are, so you can actually read it. It's wonderful. Yeah, you don't need 14 bookmarks when you read Red Pine. Anyways, that's an aside. Speaking of conditioned reality, so if you think about it, you know, what would, I think it's another list that bears thinking, like, what else, you know, when you, all right, so we have, you know, form, feelings, perceptions. I say mental formations, you can say volitional formations, habit formation, just formations, and chitta, I'm going to say, for consciousness, because now that you have a feel for chitta, it fills it out more. So what else, is there anything else when you just stop and think? That you would add to your ingredients of constructing your own experience as you move as a body through this world that you're plopped into? Anything else? Lisa's going, nope, they got it. I think so. I'm thinking a little bit of what Lee brought up yesterday about the past. And I was kind of thinking, does time factor in here? But basically, time is something we compose of these khandas. So I think they do have it covered. I don't know. But
I'd be interested to see where karma fits in with the khandas. Is it in consciousness? Is it in the chittas?
I think that it's mostly in the volitional formations, the fourth khanda. But I would say that it's everywhere too, because this is our whole conditioned experience, which is moving with it's a wash in kama. I'm not even gonna say it's moving with it. It's more like it's washed out with it too. So yeah, so I think it's everywhere, but let's think about that as we go along. And this is also something that Bhante will talk about too, is karma too, because it's just so profound. So that's a good question. Let's think. Chaitanya, Toshita throws in. Yes, Chaitanya. So is that the feelings? I should have memorized that, right? The Chaitanya's feelings. Somebody, is that right? Okay, memorizers, we're all bombing out. Okay, one of the universal Chaitasikas. Yes. Yeah, I think it's the second one. I think it's feeling. No, that's Vedana. Chaitana's the fourth.
Volition.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. From yesterday, you would think that would have stuck, but there's kind of a lot going on. Okay, thank you. So that goes back to the formations of the main carriers of the karma. But I would say all the khandhas are the experiencers of the karma. Let's go with that, kind of the resultant. So let's just review the categories with some definitions and seeing sort of also, how much livelier it is because of what we've been doing over the last few weeks. So the first category, usually the word form, but it's much more of a phenomenal experience. It's not just body, but kind of physicality, the experience of material processes. And this is something that Bhante will talk about a lot more next time also. But in the Abhidhamma Sangaha, I think 6 chapters on material processes. And I think it is the most confusing chapter. As confusing as all the mental processes are, the material processes are very, very complex and combine in a lot of unusual ways, I think. So it's not just a simple like, oh, form is the easy one. It's not. And when form does boil down to the 4 elements, but again, it's not the elements as things, it's the elements as processes. So the earth element is the processes, degrees of solidity, the processes that make things solid. Fire is the processes of maturation. It is manifest in temperature scale, but is the processes of maturation and creativity. Water is, in the Abhidhamma, considered the processes of cohesion. That's kind of interesting because we usually think of water as like spreading out, but the best way to like illustrate this is sometimes I think of hair. Like if hair is wet, it's kind of cohesive, it's in a clump, and if it's not, it's all over. So water is seen as what makes things kind of stick together. Wetness is a cohesion principle. And what did I leave out? I left out air, which is the principle of extension or movement. So this is the basis of form. And, there's a really basic meditation of sitting and trying to experience these elements in the body. And it's really interesting just to go through where do you actually feel like cohesion, how your body is staying together and staying kind of intact, and where do you feel kind of the distension of your body? That's the air element. Where do you feel the movement kind of within the body, which is going on all the time that we ignore? So it's a very interesting and it's a basic meditation in the Abhidhamma system to meditate on the elements within the body. Now, the material processes, part of why they're confusing also is because they're talked about the causal factors where they come from. There are 28 material phenomena with 18 inherent types. And then I guess that would be 10 that are not inherent, and there's a better term for that. But Bhante will go over this, but they come from kama, consciousness, temperature, and nutriment. So that's a weird nama-rupa combination there. So of all these factors that come together to cause material phenomena. And all of this is in the experience of form. So it's really, really complex, and it's everything the khandhas will kind of shade into each other, because when you start looking at form that elementally, then you kind of see how feelings are part of it, and you might even see how consciousness is part of it. So that's form. And then feelings, I'm not gonna say one other word. We spent the whole afternoon on it. Okay, so feelings is not just like, how are you doing? Feelings is everything that we talked about yesterday, that whole binary building wild component of stickiness of experience, where I kind of get, I said I wouldn't say a word, but of course I will. But I kind of think of feelings, you know, like I was saying yesterday, it's kind of this kind of intermediary zone of experience, but, you know, where things are very bodily, but also very habit determined. But I do think the feelings, you know, kind of the main thing to remember is that, you know, they have this quality of imperative to us. They are experiences with this subjective sense, but also this kind of imperative sense. More than a thought, a feeling will make you feel like I got to do something, that little bit of urgency, that little bit of like, oh, this is important, that kind of survival, you know, what am I thinking of? Evolutionary sense that this is important. It's like an evolutionary marker, like this is an important stimulus. So that's where your feelings are in this kind of progression of the khandhas. And I think the list has a definite progression. We'll kind of see this, because the next thing is perceptions. So now we're getting up into how we anchor our body and the external world. Perception is our meeting place with just the kind of equipment we have as a human body. So I have another William James quote on this from The Varieties of Religious Experience. Out of what is in itself an indistinguishable swarming continuum, devoid of distinction or emphasis, our senses make for us, by attending to this motion and ignoring that, a world full of contrasts, of sharp accents, of abrupt changes, of picturesque light and shade. So I think that's a beautiful description of perception. I like how he says that we pick out of motion. We don't pick out of stuff. And it's true, everything is in motion. So we kind of pick out what motions register, make sense, what we have habitually noted in the past as relevant. Our sense of relevance is, in a sense, the fourth khandha, the Chaitana, the volitional formations. So yeah, so out of all that, we notice something, we make it a something, we reify it, we define it. I really like the way he describes it. By attending to it, we make a world full of contrasts and accents and changes and picturesque light and shade. So, so there's a little connotation of not just taking in, but sort of noting, perceiving. Rupert Gethin talks about it's the difference between seeing blue, the color, and seeing blueness, what blueness means to you, what it means to you when you see the color blue, what it feels to you, what you do with it. Okay, so we're getting a little more into our 17 steps here. We're probably like just entering the jhavanas in a certain way. But now with the mental formations, we are clearly in the jhavanas. So this is kind of flowing in some of the same pattern there. So this is where the kama formations come in. This is a usage of the term sankhara here. And there's a good article by Bhikkhu Bodhi on the evolution of the term sankhara. And it's another one of those, like we talked about upekkha, which can mean, you know, something from, you know, from being non-judgmental to being very, very balanced in an adept meditative state. Well, sankhara is kind of similar. The the prefix sam means together and kara means doing, making. So it's doing, making, putting together, and they're co-doings, things that act in concert with other things or made by a combination of other things. I may be quoting there. I think I am from Bhikkhu Bodhi. In the suttas, there's an emphasis on sankhara, on karmically active volitions. But in the Abhidhamma, this is kind of broader, and it includes all the mental factors that arise with volition and are ethically variable, and all factors of the mind except for feeling and perception. So what I'm saying is all the chaitasikas, except for feeling and perception, which we have pulled out, are in this fourth kanda. Okay, so then the fifth one is good old chitta, the flow particles of encounter here. So chitta does have a slightly different usage in the Abhidhamma and in the suttas, where it can, again, there's kind of different levels of it. And in the suttas, there'd be more talking about chitta as a state of mind. The word state also can refer to the chitta and the surrounding chaitasikas. But here, chitta is really what we studied, that momentary flash of contact occurring one at a time, like animation out in the world or in the mind. And, you know, as we talked about it, I think the important thing here is that it is the material of transcendence. It is where we can kind of purify the universe, really. And there's also, you know, chitta can be an object of chitta, which is an interesting thing. We'll talk about that a little bit in the afternoon. So you can be observing chitta with chitta. You cannot observe the chitta that is observing. You can't observe the exact chitta you're in or that's happening, but you can take up even the one right before as an object of chitta. But it is our tool of purification, even though it is a teeny little tool. Okay, so I'm going to give you a simile from the Visuddhimagga. I think that I recommended some reading from the Visuddhimagga on the khandas. I have just recently started to really appreciate the Visuddhimagga. It's wild. It's kind of like a pomegranate. Like you just open one little thing and there's like a million juicy things in it. You know, I thought that this section on the khandas, since you basically knew what they were, would be very interesting, because he really talks about applying them to studies of emptiness and the amount of detail. I can't even believe one person thought of these many contemplations, much less actually did them. It's just, I would say that, you know, there are 84,000 lifetimes worth of contemplations in the Visuddhimagga. So this little bit of it I thought was really interesting. The Visuddhimagga also gives us more language to work with than strict Abhidhamma, which just gives us the lists and the setup. The Visuddhimagga has all this descriptive stuff, and it's kind of a refreshing break, and it also does help fill out things. So here's a simile for the aggregates, and this simile emphasizes the clinging aspect and the oh, thanks, Toshita. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I'm sorry, responding to a chat. It emphasizes the clinging and kind of dangerous aspect of relying on the khandas. Now, of course, we rely on them, but it's sort of like this right view thing. Do you rely on your khandas as a way of experiencing with the karmic lifetime you've got? Or do you rely on them as a way to hold yourself together as yourself and kind of bulldoze that through life? It's that difference. So he's really emphasizing the second. The material aggregate as an object of clinging is like a sick room, because because it is the dwelling place or physical basis. The feeling aggregate is like the sickness itself because it afflicts. Okay, that gets back to how we are with these feelings, how primary they are in our experience. The perception aggregate, is like the provocation or cause of the sickness, because how we've been taking things in, all that selectivity, how we've designed things comes from perception. The formations aggregate is like having recourse to what is unsuitable because it caused the feeling, which is the sickness, meaning it's resultant. Okay, so the formations aggregate has caused this resultant of this sickness. Because we made these formations, we're getting sick on khandas. And the consciousness aggregate is the sick person, never free from it. Yeah, so the consciousness, the citta, are actually being defiled. That's where I think words like defile come in, and that, you know, this kind of purity potential of flowing consciousness has been interrupted by this sickness of our usage of khandas. And I think it's a great, although, you know, not the most cheering, but it is a great set of similes here. What's really important in usage of the khandas that we see in the Visuddhimagga and in a lot of suttas is looking at them in terms of the three characteristics of conditioned experience. So these are our ingredients of conditioned experience. We can look at them in terms of these three characteristics, anicca, dukkha, and anatta. There's a great, well, this Rupert Gethin, I'll get to this in just a second. Rupert Gethin says that this is placed as the second utterance after the Benares discourse on the Four Noble Truths in the Vinaya Pitaka. So what he's saying is that this is like the second thing that the Buddha said to his disciples, is to look at the khandas and ask, is it permanent or impermanent? That which is impermanent, is that suffering or happiness? Is it right to regard that which is suffering of a changeable nature as, this is mine, I am this is myself? So it's, Gethin is reporting that one of the most basic teachings is look at these elements of construction, look at how we do it, and then ask yourself, is this really working to stop suffering, or is it just like shoring up something so that I can get through the day in a way that feels like what I'm used to? That's a really important thing, to always bring the khandas here. So the thing I was going to say is that Ayakima wrote a really nice paper on this, and she looks at each of the three marks of conditioned existence, and she talks about how we mask them, and in our culture and in our personalities. So if you look at anicca, impermanence, she says that we mask it by continuity, because she reminds us that a connected flow does not mean that there's no change. And this gets back to day one when we're looking at cittas, and what I think it was, the manifestation of citta is as continuity. And I was like, wow, we are experiencing these in this illusory way. And it's just true, but important to recognize. And I think she's making the same point. We experience a flow of things and we call it continuity, and we hold on to that as if it will stop the fact that this continuity will simply evolve into the next one and change. So she says on a cultural level, we manifest this by our denial of death and grief. And I think that is absolutely right. I think that's a really important point, that's a cultural khanda problem. And especially in this local American current culture. So the next one is dukkha, which is usually translated as suffering. And interestingly, she says this is masked by movement. That's a good one, I think. Like, we're all like really, really busy. And that's kind of movement. That's kind of our translation of our suffering into like, it's all okay because all of this has to happen. And so movement is a very interesting concept there. Yeah, I think that to mask our sense of suffering. She also talks about the idealization of both our attachments and our idea of attachment. Now, we're humans, we have attachments. This is how it works in our basic organic sense. But she talks about art and romantic love and all this kind of like love as salvation stuff in our culture as a way of masking suffering. And I kind of go with that too. I have recently had a theory I've been working with that romantic love, it's better to think of it as compassion boot camp than salvation. And in a way, it comes around to the same thing. But but she talks about how we use that to mask dukkha, and I think it's very true. And then going on to anatta, non-self, without this kind of permanent, abiding, defined, unchanging self. She says that we mask that by compactness and solidity. So that's kind of true, like you know, sort of if we can, I mean, I think we compactness, I think of like we like to pack everything into, you know, like from the grocery bag to our calendar. We like to pack it up neatly without a lot of space and mess. I know I love to. But that's kind of like overvaluation of our subjectivity or our point of view. And, you know, she makes the point that momentary phenomena are no more important than the next one or somebody else's momentary phenomena. And there isn't really like a core or a solid or a gut feeling. When people in therapy say, well, I'm just listening to my gut feeling, I always think, oh, we're in trouble. Because that's just a way of saying, I'm picking this out and I'm going to act like it's solid and core and self, but it's just another thing. Or soulmates. I have the same feeling when people talk about soulmates. Like, you know, we do have definite different types of connections, like we were talking about that yesterday, but the idea that there's a person, that's that same kind of compactness, miscomprehension. So these are, you know, some different angles on looking at conditioned phenomena and how they can help us either remember or forget these marks of conditioned phenomena. I have another thing I wanted to actually ask if anybody can figure this out from the Visuddhimagga. I'm going to put up a screen share, and I tried, but this is also one of those. I got some of today's onto Word documents so I could spread them out, but this is one that I couldn't. And I did put all of yesterday's screen shares on, and I'll put on today's too. And I noticed that the picture of me on the thing looks like Homer Simpson going, doo. But anyways, okay.
I changed it.
You did. It was kind of funny. It really did look like Homer Simpson. Okay, so this is a Visuddhimagga. This is talking about some of the contemplations. Oh, it says I've been disabled from screen sharing.
Sorry, it's fixed.
That's okay. Appreciate it. This is it. Okay, so this is another one that it may be really hard to see, but I cannot figure out the numerical thing in this. So you get bonus points if you can, but in the beginning, it makes sense. There are 50 kinds of contemplation of impermanence here. By taking the following 10, in the case of each aggregate, I gotta move something, as impermanent, as disintegrating, as fickle, as perishable, as unenduring, as subject to change, as having no core, as due to be annihilated, as formed, as subject to death. So it's just all these descriptors of the 3 marks. I like due to be annihilated. That's kind of a great phrase. So you take each of those 10 and you put it, you would actually sit with each of those in each of the khandhas, so that's 50. And there are 25 kinds of contemplation of not self by taking the following 5 in the case of each aggregate as alien. The aggregate is alien to us, actually. It's not like we're so familiar. I mean, we think we're so familiar with our body, but I have no clue how this whole thing works. Anyways, as empty, as vain, as void, as not self. So then you've got like 75 things you're doing. Skip the footnotes. There are 125 kinds of contemplation of pain, the dukkha, by taking the rest, beginning with as painful as a disease in the case of each aggregate. So when a person comprehends the 5 aggregates by means of this comprehending is impermanent, etc., in its 200 aspects, his comprehending as impermanent, painful, and not self, which is called inductive insight, is strengthened. These in the first place are the directions for undertaking comprehension here in accordance with the method given in the texts. So this is your opener to the khandhas in the Visuddhimagga. And this is kind of like, we're talking about feelings, like accepting, what was the 3 things? Accepting, unraveling, and retraining. Well, this is a very, very specific kind of retraining that is being coached here. So you have, these very specific contemplations that you sit with, and it's interesting to try some of these. I think all 200 is probably going to be a bit of a project, but it does build up what is called here inductive insight. But I just think it builds up a sense. It actually builds up a sense of letting go, if I could be paradoxical there. But does anybody understand what is meant by the 200 aspects? Because I've got like 75 and then I don't get what this 125 is. Does anybody get the logic of that?
So I don't want to misspeak. So a couple of weeks ago, so I sit in one of, Professor Hallisey from Stanford? So he's a prominent, so he's the author behind Therigatha, if you recall that book. So he's the author behind Therigatha. So yes. In his class, we are reading Ahara Sutta these days, which is relevant, which is related to Visuddhimagga in a very tangential way. Again, I'll reach out to him, and so we had exactly this 50 figure came up, the 50 types of things, and we had a discussion about it. At the time, I didn't really pay attention to it. I was like, yeah, sure, there's a 50 things. Sure enough, karma catches up with me, and we are talking about the same exact things a week later.
That's really funny. That's really funny. The 50 things came right back to you and said,
right,
hey,
exactly. So it came, right. So it was presented to me, and I was like, yeah, there's another 50 things I don't want to know about. And sure enough, a week later, we're talking about the same exact thing. So
that's hilarious.
What I remember is it's a tenfold subcategorization of the 5 skandhas. So there's some sort of a categorization, maybe Bhante might remember. So there's some sort of a deep way of breaking it down into like 10 into 5, 50, and it further breaks down into 25 more things. So right. Again, your pomegranate analogy, you start opening it up and there's all sorts of seeds here.
Oh, yes, there are. Yes, there are so many juicy red seeds, right?
Right.
Well, that's really, really funny about the 50, because that's such an obscure detail. And that happens so often that, some obscure detail will enter your world a bunch of times and, in a short period of time. And it sort of does say to you, this is something to, it's like I was saying yesterday in the texts when they're writing and they say, pay attention to this. Look at this. This is important. So apparently this must be your moment for that. So so thank you. And this is, I'm going to take it down, but just to give an idea of, the kinds of contemplations available. And I think it's great to play around with these. I can't say that, I've ever walked through 200 of them. It's just good to get a feel for it, even to stop here and see whatever it is. Now, I'm just making sure that Bhante is in here, but we'll talk to him later about this and see if he can fill it out a little bit. But, the Visuddhimagga just really pounds us with this awareness, and it's good. Like, I'll just read a little bit more. How does he do this contemplation? He does it by means of comprehension as impermanent because of non-endlessness, and because of possession of a beginning and an end, as painful because of oppression by rise and fall, and because of being the basis for pain, as a disease because of having to be maintained by conditions, and because of being the root of disease. It's interesting, the khandhas are, of course, the root of disease. As a dart because of producing oppression, because of penetrating inside, and because of being hard to extract. As alien because of inability to have mastery exercised over them, and because of intractability. I think that's one is used a lot with the sense of self. There's no mastery over it, really. And that I kind of pondered that for quite a while, but I think it is helpful. We really, if it was really a self, we would be able to run it, and we don't. As void because devoid of the state of being an owner, abider, doer, experiencer, director. As not self because of itself having no owner. As disintegrating, fickle, perishable, unenduring, subject to change, and on and on. So I gave you those few pages to read, so if you could actually plow through those few pages, you have like taken a bath in the awareness of the characteristics. And it's very, very helpful. Just the language, how he does that. I think I like, certain things stand out to me, like no director. I remember in graduate school, there's a thing called the executive ego that's kind of running the conscious show, apparently, in a certain psych theory. And I remember raising my hand way back in like the early 80s saying, I don't think I have one. What, are you sure there's something running the show? Yeah, so there's really no director. It's true. So this kind of study is a course correction. It's not going to make things, veer off onto another path. It's all about course correction, because all of this is flowing and we're just tapping it over. And this is like just giving us a little more awareness. And it's a really basic purification practice to understand this. That the khandhas are often called the upadana khandha, clinging to the khandhas, overvaluing our constructions, and forgetting how essentially arbitrary they are. And that it's just causes and conditions are the only base. And our input of intention, as we talked about yesterday, is one of those causes and conditions, but it's all meetings of phenomena in motion and causes and conditions. So let me pause there and I just ask if you have any comments or questions, about the masking of the three characteristics and how we do it, and about the unmasking by this type of study. Any thoughts there? Everybody's hanging with okay, though? Yeah.
If no one else has any thoughts, so
I'm
there's a connection. In the five khandhas we have form, vedana, so the feeling and such and so forth. The same stuff appear in the paticca the dependent coordination, avijja, sankara, vijnana. So again, same stuff. So there's also nama rupa, and after nama rupa, form and formation, there's phassa, contact, such and so forth.
Yes.
And when you start talking about, as we discussed last week, I think when we started talking about cetasikas, again, you have contact. So they are all my point is this is basically the same thing explained again and again and again.
Absolutely.
Different granularity, different levels.
Toshito, you are like a plant for the next thing that we're getting to lately, because that's exactly where this is all going to head. Because actually the next thing we're going to look at are the different, like stacking up the different ways of breaking down reality. Because they are just ways of breaking down reality. And then I'm really can't wait to work on dependent origination, but that's not until April 4th. But we're going to look at the links, the 12 dependent origination links. We're going to look at them forwards and we're going to look at them backwards. Because they're very important to understand like how we build up these formations. And then again, we're always looking at how we can undo. And that's what all of this learning is about, kind of undoing some tendencies that don't work so well. So that's what these contemplations are about. And that's what the study of the khandhas is about. And yes, everything is in motion, causing each other. It's just so amazing. Once you start getting deeper in, like you can't pick out one piece of it separately. You pick out one piece and everything comes with it and flushes up. And the more you know, the more this happens. And so we're at that point, you know, we have a base of like how complex the chitta are, how complex the complexity is exponentially magnified when we add in the Chaitasika factors to that constellation, and we're getting that sense. So, so then when you look at the khandhas, it seems like you're in another world from that, but really all of that is compiling to have us experience, and then we take this experience and we kind of break it up into these khandhas, and then we start to hold on to it, and then we study and start to loosen our grip. That's basically, I think, what we're all going through here. I think I have, do you think it's a good break time, or one more thing? Anybody? I'll make the call. What were you going to say, Corey?
I was gonna say it's your show. So-
Yeah. Okay, so thank you. Yeah, I was just gonna say I'll make the call. Let's take the break because it's a ton to digest. I mean, the khandhas aren't like such technical information, but they are. So let it like set for a bit. Let's come back at 9 o'clock, and we're gonna break up ourselves in a bunch of ways at 9 o'clock. Okay. I couldn't believe before class how much stuff you had up there in the Slack. Yeah.
Some of those I had already had, and I opened Manual of Abhidhamma, and I found a little note in it. It said page 55. So that's as far as, I thought it was 44, but that's as far as I got into that book 12 years ago. That's
Yeah.
I realized I needed to put it aside. So, you know, that's where your book is, right next to that one.
I feel like 55. I'm just going to take a quick look. What did you get up to? Oh, you got up to the fine material sphere. You're doing pretty well. That book is, you know, dense. It's dense to penetrate. It is.
Well, it was at a time when I was trying to figure out who Buddhists were and what they believed, you know, before I really jumped in. So I was just stepping my toe in, and I was reading all these books, including Noble Strategy.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, so,
Interesting.
you know, I realized that was just too over my head. So I needed
Yeah.
to get back to, you know, like Bhante G, you know,
Yeah,
gentle things, you know.
yeah, that is not the book to answer that question.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. But it's such a beautiful exposition. It's just got this, you know, this great clarity. I really, it's like clear water, and I you know, but you got to be really patient with the CMA, and the Visuddhimagga too requires a certain kind of patience of reading. It's almost like reading poetry. You just can't like zoop through. You got to
No. Yeah. Bhante G is like, you know, Dr. Seuss by comparison, you know. I mean, it's so easy, you
Who
know.
are you referring to as Bhante G? I'm sorry.
Bhante Gunaratana.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. No, it's a really, and to write like Dr. Seuss about Buddhism is such a skill.
Yeah.
Such a skill. I mean, you know, that's a beautiful ability to bring it to that level too. So we can all enter, you know, and that was what I had hoped to do writing about the Abhidhamma. My goal had been like, this is just in monastic and academic circles. Everybody should know about this, you know? So I wanted to write the entry for everybody, but it's, I don't know, you know, if that's possible really, but
Yeah, you have to work up to it, you know.
yeah, I think so. It is not beginner study, but it's where we are. And it is, if it's not for beginners, it is for, it is still so basic. And that's kind of the beauty of it. I mean, you just feel this directness. And I think the other thing that is just so wonderful about the Abhidhamma is the kind of corpus callosum action of it, where we really use both sides of our brain so much. I mean, because you just have to kind of locate it. And, you know, I have a friend who teaches Buddhist studies, and she once saw somebody, I believe he was from Sri Lanka, and he was answering questions about the Abhidhamma, and it was all memorized, as Bhante said. And when somebody was asking questions, that the monk kind of like had to stop and turn and look off to the side, because some of the information was located there.
Yes.
You know, and there are those medieval stories about houses of memory, where people to memorize things construct houses, actually literally or in their mind. So it's kind of like that aspect of learning that I love.
For me, it's file folders. I have them laid out. Yes. And there are things down there, and there are things down there, and up there and up there. So
That's
it's
really,
like you have to pull them in.
that's really interesting. And it's a great way to learn, to hold your learning, which I find, you know, memory is very difficult. It's a great way to memorize. And it's also leads right into like non-self, because you don't need it in your body. It's in space. You can carry it with you, but it's not in your body. You don't own that stuff in that way.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to take a few minutes with now. In the commentaries, there are 4 personality errors that are mentioned along with the khandhas as mistakes that we make, structural kind of mistakes we make in our reasoning to overly cling to ourselves. So one is that, well, I'm going to put up a chart, because I'm actually having trouble remembering all of them. Okay. Okay, is this pretty, how's that look? Reasonable, or I can get bigger on this one?
That's fine for me. I don't know about laptop users.
Okay. So these are the errors that we make in our logic, that are so easy to make. So the first is simply that the khandha is the self. And the second is that you kind of own it. The self owns this khandha. And the other is that the self is in it. And the fourth is that the khandha is in the self. Now these are you know, you can kind of get a feel for each of these. Khandha is the self, you know, like you are what you eat, or, you know, this body is me. This is it. The ownership thing is like, it's easy to feel like you own your body, or you own your thoughts. But Francesca just said her thoughts can be all over the place. We could all have access to them. It's kind of funny, you know, you don't necessarily own your perceptions. And the other is that the self is in the khandha. Now here feelings come in a lot. I think the experience of feeling can easily be like, I am walking around in a cloud of feeling. Myself is this person immersed in this feeling. Or the contrary one is that this self has this khandha inside. You know, these magical thoughts and feelings are walking around inside of this body, which is me. So these are ways that we, you know, they're very natural. We have a lot of misperceptions. Like there are visual misperceptions, like no matter what we see, we assume that the light source is above. And so when you see a drawing of something with a light source or from below, you get kind of confused. We assume that edges are convex. You know, we just assume if there's a curve that it's the outer edge is convex. You know, we have these like visual assumptions, and these are self-assumptions. So I wanted to take a minute with this chart. This is, I think, one of the most useful exercises of Abhidhamma usage, to actually fill out this chart with experience. And we're not going to do that whole thing now, but I would like it if we could just maybe take a few minutes, like 5 minutes, and fill out a few of them. So there, it's difficult, especially when you get down to the chitta, but mental formations, kanda equals self. Okay, I'm just picking one. Mental formations and kanda equals self would be that poem. I don't remember how the poem goes, but I never liked it. Like, I am destiny and I will make what I wish to happen, happen. What's that poem? It's a famous poem. Anyways, that would be an example there. Thinking, I will control destiny. So let's take a few minutes and fill in ones, either experiences you have or that you've noticed in other people, because sometimes that's an easier viewpoint. And so let's do that for like 5 minutes and then see if we can, kick around a few errors that we've noticed that we could undo. Are you okay to roll on and talk about this a little? I'm gonna take down the chart. We had a few minutes with it. I seriously get new ideas every single time I look at this chart. So what are some of the ideas that you came up with or realizations from trying to put experience into this abstract bunch of squares? Can anybody kick out an example?
I came up with several examples, but I don't exactly know where to put them. Like a sports fan, say a Green Bay Packers fan, rabid fan, paints their face. I'm not exactly sure where to plug them in. You know,
That's
somebody else.
interesting. What do people think? Where would you put rabid fandom?
Yeah.
In this chart? Because that's it. I'm sure it should be.
Yeah, notice
Any
I said things about, I'm thinking about other people, not myself, you know.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's easier to see things out there, all the foundations of mindfulness objects you're supposed to look at internally and externally. So sometimes it's easier to see. I might put that is a hard one. I feel like it's in the mental formations, but is it the self is the mental formation, or the self is kind of in that formation? I might go there.
I'd say in the mental formation.
You
Hey,
would.
yeah, at least that's how I'm leaning.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a very good one. Right? I think there is something there about it's like a whole formation of self about competition and power. So I kind of yeah.
Because it's also not a momentary thing either. So it's something that they commit to for several hours or an entire day,
Or a lifetime.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it's a
chances are when they go to work, it's let go for a little bit, but like when they're tailgating or at a football game or whatever, then they're there for a long haul. So they're in that formation for
it's almost like you could take that problem and walk through the khandhas too, because the body's transformed into an instrument of being a fan, and I'm sure the emotions are wrapped up in like the competition and and then the thoughts also, and then the whole formation is like I am this person that mighty on the field, and then the cheetahs are all like the whole consciousness is kind of, maybe I would say, constricted into this kind of patterning.
Well, it would also depend upon the actual person who has that concept, because for some people they're going to think of it as part of who I am, and other people are going to see it as this is me, this is what I am. Like no matter where they go, no matter what the local team is, if they move, they're still the Green Bay Packers fans, because that's part of who they are. That is who they are, rather. And somebody else may just feel that it's a part of their self to be part of the local community around a sports team. And if they move somewhere else, they'll be a fan of the Rams or whoever rather than the Green Bay Packers. So it's a question of how much they identify specifically with the Green Bay Packers versus how much they just identify with feeling like they're a part of a community, and this makes them feel like they have a strong part of themselves that is someone who belongs and someone who has ties with others. So that would make the difference between whether it's the self in the khandha or the khandha in the self.
Well, I think in a way, Sherry, that's a very important point. It almost illustrates the difference between a khandha and upadana khandha, because a khandha, okay, that's a part of you, and Toshito throws in the word attachment, how much attachment you have. It's just a part of you, something you enjoy. That's kind of like, okay, that's maybe a kanda, but it's this clinging that you described where it becomes like really integral to your experience. Yeah, that's an interesting, important thing. And I think that's exactly right. All of these are really so dependent on how the usage occurs.
I like Sherry's example because some ardent sports fans, when it comes to Super Bowl, all of a sudden ditch their favorite team and attach themselves to the winning team. There are
Right.
fans like that, which like hop on the bandwagon and run on the bandwagon as long as the team is winning and jump off of it as soon as it starts flopping. So
Mhm.
that's why I think this is more or less attachment.
I use Green Bay because the Packers, because the town owns the team. I don't, if you don't know that, the town owns the team, and when they have a snowfall, fans come out and sweep all of the seats off before the game. So they are really attached to their
Oh, yeah.
team.
Yes. Well, I've also read somewhere that the incidence of domestic abuse increases in Green Bay after they lose.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's really bad. But you know, that's where the extreme can go to. You know, that's like an illustration of, you know, I'm not saying that all sports fans go to that extreme, but that's the extreme that misuse of condos goes to. But
So
yes, the fair
that's
weather
also,
fan is
sorry.
attached to winning, not the team. That's what you're
Right.
describing, Toshita. It's a fair weather fan. They just like to be with the winners.
Right.
That's a different kind of attachment.
Right.
Yeah.
So to give another very extreme analogy, over here, I guess we haven't seen it at that level, but in the subcontinent, cricket is a big thing. Indian fans, for example, when they lose, they burn houses belonging to the players. I'm like, seriously? Whoa, I mean, whoa. It's just a game. They play to win and they lose by trying to win, and you go and burn them. And the same fans, I guess, idolize them and even worship them like gods when they are winning, go swinging back and forth. So it's fascinating sometimes.
It is. That's incredible. This brings up like such an interesting cultural phenomena where we project aspects of our attachments and conduits onto public activities, and this can be arts activities or sports activities. I guess that's mostly what I'm thinking of. And we become just, you know, this is the whole phenomena of celebrity. It's these 20 errors projected and magnified out there. That's really what it is. It's all within this. It's very interesting. It was a very interesting example to come up. I had an awareness on looking at it this time because I was working with the cheetah line, which is always the most difficult. And I was thinking about the one like where the self was in the kanda. And I realized that like sometimes I will misuse the idea of rebirth. And it never holds, but you know, if you think of rebirth linking as a flow of cheetahs, sometimes you can think, oh, well, I will still be here. But that's putting myself in a cheetah or in a flow of cheetah, right? Because the whole point is that the flow of cheetah will still be here, but not I, not me, not my consciousness. That I even can use a phrase like that is actually another example of owning cheetah. Like my consciousness as opposed to yours. What's that? We're all together. So the cheetah line is very difficult, but I kind of was working with it today, and I had that realization that when sometimes people go, well, you'll live on in the consciousness flow. No, you will not live on in the consciousness flow. The consciousness flow will flow on. That's a different statement, sadly. Yeah. Were there any other realizations from this chart?
So I had one that was actually really similar to yours, Dr. Jacobs, that was about the consciousness. I was thinking about how I'd been reading about, or actually listening to an audiobook about the disciples of the Buddha, and they talk about some of the Jataka stories about Moggallana and Sariputra, how they were bound together for existences upon existences, and how they were reborn together in different forms. And it's like, well, they weren't really themselves, you know, they weren't really, this wasn't Moggallana, this wasn't Sariputra, they were different, like, you know, they were not just themselves being together again, you know, so
Yeah.
similar idea.
Yes. Was there a chat about, about couples? Yes, Kyle and Toshita were talking about couples meeting again in other lives. Yeah, so it's not like, oh, yay, here we are again, but it's like something happens. Jeff, can I ask you the name of that book? Because I'm real interested in Sariputta.
Yeah, it's let me just double check. I'll put it in the chat. I listened to it on Audible because I do a lot of driving, but should be Great Disciples. I'm typing as I do this of the Buddha, but I'll stick it.
Thank you.
I'll stick it in the chat.
Sounds really interesting because I do think sometimes when you look at the disciple constellation, it is an interesting constellation that seems to reappear in different kinds of philosophical bodies. So I think that's the point you were making. Thanks. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Related to what just Jeff said, so I've also thought about how did Buddha trace back his like 550 life forms or all that stuff. So to me, I felt like that's also him being able to break everything down to this minuscule level of mind moment and tracing it back all the way down to whatever the extent he could think. And based on, because he was that, at least that's what we believe, he was that much smart, he was able to figure out where other people were at what time and see that these existences, Moggallana's existence or Sariputta's existence, existed in another form, in another lifetime, coexisted, I guess.
Yes, I agree. Well, I think that the point is that what you're saying is exactly right. They could break things down so well that there was no self encasing it. And it is the self encasing it that blocks us from the memory. Because it is like a constriction or an encasing. And if you really were broken down, and I believe, you know, if you didn't have that self to block it up, you would just go and be able to perceive. And that's what you're saying, so broken down. It's very interesting. Good morning, Bante. How are you? We've been having a lot of interesting work with the khandas this morning so far.
Interesting discussion. I like your discussions.
Yes, they really bring a lot out. Yeah, everybody, this group has a lot of really interesting ideas and insights.
Nice.
Yes.
You opening up and sharing your thoughts.
Yes, it's really something. Yeah, not owning we're talking about the personality errors, so we're not owning our perceptions, we're just bringing them to each other and our insights. Well, I feel like we could shift gears from this and look at, I want to kind of look at this khanda list, and this is what Toshita was anticipating, in a different perspective as a kind of a view of reality. And so I want to show you, we're kind of in chapter 7 that I was saying, the categories, and this is the end of chapter 7, which is kind of the big climax of the Abhidhamma Sangaha, I think. And then we go into conditionality. And remember, there are two ways to look at things. And the Abhidhamma is constantly doing both. And one is the analytic and the other is the synthetic. So after, this is kind of the peak of the analytic moments of the Abhidhamma. And then we go into the synthetic study. Now they're all happening all the time, but the synthetic study will then be about how do these things move together, looking specifically at the combinations and the causations, and then looking at like the meditation practices that actually we can use to keep things moving. So it moves into that, but this is kind of the peak moment of analysis in the Abhidhamma Sangaha, and I think the Abhidhamma too. Okay, is that pretty visible? This is a really, really important and basic chart that we're going to spend some time on now. So what it is doing, you know, as it says, is breaking up the four ultimates. So it's basically, we start with ultimate realities. And Bhante talked about this a little bit on the first day, I think. Like Toshito was saying, there are just all these different ways to break it up. And the it is always the same thing that we're breaking up. But this is like core. This is the core of Abhidhamma, I think. So your ultimate realities, you have matter, mental factors, nibbana, and consciousness. So you can see that these three are the conditioned realities, and nibbana is just your slice there. It's not in the works as we're going to break things down in conditioned reality. But conditioned reality is made up of, you know, the consciousness, the chittas, you've got the 89 there, or 121, the mental factors, 52, and matter says 28 because of the 28 material phenomena that Bhante will talk about next time. Okay, and then our next breakdown is the aggregates. And we just had that sense of that. There's no aggregate that corresponds with nibbana because they're all conditioned phenomena. And yeah, and as we talked about before, the feeling aggregate and the perception aggregate are each one chaitasika, and then all the rest are in the formations aggregate. So that's why under mental factors, so it's all lining up, you know, you can just drip on down and you'll see the same stuff in different terms. Okay. I'm going to read another Red Pine quote here, where he talks about this list and in the Lankavatara Sutta in his commentary. In the centuries following the Buddha's nirvana, instructions centered around a trio of concepts designed to focus attention in such a way that the non-existence of the self would become evident and the liberation from suffering would follow. These included the 5 khandhas, the 12 ayatanas, that's the 6 powers and 6 domains of sensation, and the 18 dhatus, the ayatanas plus the addition of 6 forms of consciousness. These were 3 views of the same thing, our mind. They were simply different ways of dividing any given moment of awareness into a manageable matrix to demonstrate to anyone willing to wander around in these matrices that they contained the universe of our awareness, its inside and its outside, and yet they contained no self. That was their function, to show practitioners that there was no self. So this is really how basic and important this teaching is of the 5, 12, and the 18, these lists. So let's go on and define them a little more technically, and then we'll come back and look at them. We're basically going to define them a little more technically and then flip them on their head. But ayatana is translated as base. That's your next category of 12. And in the Visuddhimagga, it translates ayatana as actuating and sphere or location meeting place. Here's a quote from the Visuddhimagga, again with this pretty negative cast about conditioned things. Furthermore, the internal bases should be regarded as an empty village because they are devoid of lastingness, pleasure, and self. And the external ones as village raiding robbers because they raid the internal ones. I just love the language there. But the sense spaces, that this 12 is basically dividing the sense sphere into bases of receptivity and bases of objects. So we have bases inside our body, physical and material bases. Physical and material, no, I mean material and mental bases. And we're going to talk a little bit about the emptiness in this, but we have receptors in each sense organ. And then there are the objects out there. And these are the essential material base of experience. So you have eye, ear, nose, tongue, body in terms of the base and in terms of the object. Then you have a mental object base. These are the mental objects that exist absolutely regardless of sensory experience. Now they're a little difficult. Subtle matter is a kind of matter that does not directly contribute to the arising of sense consciousness. So being able to experience that, I would say, is a kind of variable thing, but my guess is that we all experience it without conscious awareness quite a bit. And the mental object base also includes the Chaitasikas, and it includes Nibbana because it can be an object of our mental awareness. So it's not Nibbana as the unconditioned, but it is Nibbana turned into an object of awareness. So that's why this all falls under this stack here. And then we have the mind base. The mind base is an idea that was added in the commentaries, which is that the mind base is in the heart. And the word for heart here is hadaya or hadaya. It's meant in a mental sense as well as physically, the heart of things. And in the Visuddhimagga notes, the actual brain is not mentioned in the Abhidhamma until it becomes the 32nd part of the body for the body parts contemplation. So the brain is not mentioned in the mind base, but this is that, that there's a little pocket inside the heart with a little pool of blood, and that is where, that is the physical basis of mind energy. So, so let me see, there's a good quote. Oh yeah, from Marapana, Tilak Marapana's book. He says, it does not necessarily mean that the mind resides in the heart, with quotes, but the cohesion of the mental element is dependent on this heart phenomena, which is contained in the blood inside the heart. I like that explanation. It's also said somewhere, I think in the Visuddhimagga notes, that this was a prevalent idea at the time that might have been supported by the Upanishads, and that the Buddha did not contradict this idea, and the Buddha did not, you know, affirm this idea. But this idea is here, and it's part of the sense spaces. So I'm going to take this down for a second and put up something else, but we'll come back to it, so remember it. I made a little research, and it's somewhere, on sense spaces, because I wanted to make the point of how the sense spaces, you look closely at them and you end up in emptiness. And it's just like wave and particle theory. Like if you look really, really closely at how the human body registers things in our senses, it becomes so minuscule, so dynamic, so mechanical or chemical, so filled with motion that it's very hard to draw the line and say exactly where a sense space is a physical object and where it is a phenomena. So I kind of like was looking at that. So I made this called Humans Creating Experience. So if we look at the eye, the physical base is these photoreceptor cells in the retina. So there's about 10 million of these in a rod cell. That doesn't make sense. Maybe they're molecules. Sorry, I got to check that one out. But there's a lot of them, okay? And they are taking in a photon, a particle that represents a quantity of light, and they are turning that into a nerve impulse. That's what I would say the eye sense space is. So what do we produce with that? Visualizations, like huge visualizations. I'm saying that because we don't replicate what we're seeing out there, we create visualizations. It's almost like we're hallucinatory with the objects helping us. But that's what we create. Then in the ear, there are these little hair cells, and these are just cells in the cochlea, and they take waves and they amplify it. And then they hit the liquid, and that changes it to, there's liquid inside, and that changes it to an electrical impulse. So that's how teeny the ear base is. The nose, oh, and we do create with that. We use sound waves as our material. That's the smallest object. The base and object I'm referring to are the ayatanas here, the 12. The object is sound waves, and what we produce with that is the soundscape. And we ignore aspects of it unless something impinges. And that word you'll remember from the 17 steps. If something impinges in sound, we will make a note of it. But we are always taking in sound, you know, from 360 degrees and above and below. And there's a whole lot of information that we just are letting sit in that dark cave that we're not paying attention to. So I call the production there a soundscape. And a smellscape, I will go for the nose, because it's the same deal. We have airborne molecules, and then there are cilia, little fibery things, of millions of olfactory receptory cells that are up in our nasal cavity, in the epithelium in the back. And the interesting thing about these cells that I learned about is they are actually neurons. So they don't have to like transmit to the brain. They are ending up in the brain. And that's why smell, you know, smell has become an increasingly noticed object of public attention because of COVID symptoms of people losing smell. And it is so basic and so ignored, but our physical base for our sense of smell actually goes right to the brain, is part of the brain extended actually, which is sort of true of the body also. Then in the tongue or taste receptor cells are in taste buds. And the smallest scale object is that these molecules bind to saliva, and that's how we taste things. And it's interesting, this production is inside the mouth, but mentally it's, of course, just like Francesca's remembrances outside the body, you know, mentally this production can be anywhere, but the experience is internal to the body. And so the meeting is internal. The other meetings are from external to internal. It's just kind of interesting with the senses. So in the body, the body sensation, there are 3 types of mechanoreceptors that are actually, they are nerve cells, so they extend to the central nervous system. And some are encapsulated and some are not. Some are those raw nerve endings that we have people step on. But the way they work, the object is that the plasma membrane is deformed. Something impinges enough on the plasma membrane of these cells that we have sensation of texture, pressure, pain, temperature sensitivity, all the body awareness that we have of touch. So then in the mind, this is just, you know, another Buddhist and Abhidhamma concept that the mind is a sense. It's just another filter for things. And here the physical base is, as we were discussing yesterday, the neurotransmitters that cross the synapses between neurons. So there's the end of the neuron, there's the base of the next one, and these little chemicals are going back and forth, delivering whatever they deliver. And the way it happens is that there's a change in calcium level. which causes an impulse switch from a positive to negative charge in ions. And then that impulse goes across to the next neuron. That's how we think. That's how we use our mind, our brain, not our mind. So the production there, what is our production? I was thinking raw pattern. And by that, I mean, we produce pattern. We make kind of visual or language or numerical or sound. We do something in our mind where we repeat it, and then we say, that's what it is, and that's what will keep being, and that's what it will remain. We make pattern of these experiences. So this is just one way to break down the ayatanas, but I think it's helpful again to look at it, not to be mechanistic, but to get into how dynamic it is. And in the manual of Naradateras, we get the more traditional breakdown that does the same thing, but it's really, really similar, again, with this kind of awareness. In this one, the eye base is described as something that's right in the center of the black disc of the eye, and it's described as 7 ocular membranes down, and it's comparable to a louse's head. That's how teeny the eye base is described in traditional Abhidhamma usage. The nose base is inside the cavity of the aggregate nasal organism, in appearance like a goat's hoof. I don't know where that comes from, but I would not be surprised if there's some, anatomical truth to that. Taste, did I skip hearing? Oh yeah, ear, they said the fine reddish hairs within the ear. And where was I? Taste is situated about the middle of the aggregate gustatory organism, being the tongue, I guess, in appearance like the upper side of the leaf of a lotus. And the body is described, the body receptor, as diffused over the whole bodily form, just as oil pervades an entire cotton rag. So those are the more tangible descriptors from the Abhidhamma time, but they're not so different, about the sense spaces, and the point being that they are very dynamic occurrences as well as physical reality that we need to have our meetings in the world. So I think we should go back to the chart now. Do you feel pretty good on the ayatanas, the breakdown of 12? It's the 6 senses in the bases and the objects. And that's another way to slice up conditioned reality. Okay, so back to the CMA, or the Comprehensive Manual. It should be here. Yes, it is. Yay. Okay. Our next one are the elements. Now here, what we add are the consciousnesses. So really, for things to happen, this was all under the mind base before. And I have to get my hard copy. Really, for anything to happen, you have to have 2 things meeting, but they always meet in a field. And that context, that field, is really important and is really Buddhist to always remember that. That's, I kind of think what the whole religion does is contextualize experience. So what we have there, the mind base is divided into the consciousnesses. Now the mind element is put under the mind base. So that's a little bit different. It includes the 5-door adverting consciousness. These are just specific types of citta that are put under here. I think to account for the fact that there are consciousnesses that are purely mental, and then there are consciousnesses that are mental that come from sensory experiences, and that they're different. But the mind element includes the 5-door adverting consciousness and the 2 receiving consciousnesses, while the mind consciousness element includes the investigating consciousness. So this is breaking it down in a technical way that is confusing to me. The 6 kinds of objects of the mind. Yeah. But basically, the point of the elements is that you put in the third piece, which is the field of interaction. I'm gonna take this down and ask Bhante if he can do any clarifying on that. Is there, can you clarify on the mind element, and or does it matter? Or maybe he might not be here. Well, I'm going to go with that. It doesn't matter so much. It's just a very specific way of breaking down, because this involves the doors that are, we're not going to talk about the chittas are all also categorized in terms of doorways, and each sense consciousness and the mind consciousness has a doorway, and the mind door can be opened by a sense consciousness, or there can be just a mind consciousness. And that's the best I can do with that. But this chart, as Red Pine described, and in its placement in the Abhidhamma, is so significant. I'd like to read the closing, or have somebody else read the closing even of the chapter 7 that refers to this. This is really okay. I don't know if this is readable by any, is this readable by anybody? Oh, wait a minute, I can make it bigger.
I can read it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Matter, feeling, perception, the remaining mental factors, and consciousness. These 5 are called the 5 aggregates. The same state that pertain to the 3 mundane planes are regarded as the 5 aggregates of clinging. As Nibbana lacks differentiation, such as past, present, future, it is excluded from the categories of aggregates. Owing to the difference between doors and objects, there are 12 sense bases. In accordance with doors, objects, and their corresponding consciousness arise the 18 elements. The round of existence in the 3 planes is suffering. Craving is its origin. Cessation is Nibbana. The path is regarded as supramundane. Mental states associated with the paths and the fruits are excluded from the 4 truths. Thus, the compendium of the whole has been explained in 5 ways.
Thank you so much. I think it's worth hearing. That is the end of chapter 7. And isn't that like the big boom, the 5, the 12, the 18, and the 4 noble truths. And I think it just is like this amazing wrap up. And really, if you had cliff notes to the Abhidhamma, it would be this. And if you really, really understood this, you would really, really understand the 4 noble truths. So that's why we're here. I would like to look at this in one other way. But let's just stop here for a second. Any questions on this breakdown of reality or its utility? What it helps us understand.
On the chart where you mentioned about the receiving and investigating, where did they go? I didn't see it on the chart. It all says it's consciousness.
Yes, they are under, and I'd have to, I'm sorry, I'm right now not, this is a detail that is very hard, but they are under the mind consciousness element.
So all the way to the right?
Yeah. So they're not specifically listed, yes, to the right and bottom right corner there. Yeah, so they're not specifically listed, but I'm just saying that that's what they're, that's how they break it down there. They put them there. Because
Okay,
it's
thank
different
you.
types of chitta, sure. Yeah, it's confusing in the bottom right there, very confusing. But the basic idea is, that, they're it's a little specifics about breaking down mind consciousness, but that we have a consciousness that goes with each sense. And, like one way I like to kind of play with visual consciousness is if you close your eyes, you can feel the difference between maintaining visual consciousness and letting it go. Like if you close your eyes and you concentrate on a sound, you're not looking at anything. But if you close your eyes and you maintain visual consciousness, you see the blackness and the stuff that's inside your eyes. If you squeeze your eyes harder, it goes darker. I mean, there's a lot of visual going on with closed eyes, which I'm sure we all notice in meditation. It's not like you close your eyes and visual consciousness is gone. The material change just changes the field of visual consciousness, but it does not stop it. And it's very interesting to think of these different types of consciousnesses.
Another thing I like to share is when you talked about there's a little tiny blood area in our heart that actually is doing the brain function, that coincides the herbal medicine that I learned like last month or so. The herbal doctor teacher said the organ that actually will be in charge of our brain is in our heart. And I thought, wow, it's about the same here.
That's really interesting. That really is. And I just think it's that is interesting and kind of confirming. And I think it's a useful reorientation moment to think of that. We like, I think we culturally kind of overvalue the brain, and there's so much research about the brain that is really, really interesting and could lead to productive breakthroughs in a lot of suffering. But the idea that the brain and the mind are the same thing is so dangerous. And that this energy, I think it does give it a little more of a feel to say that this energy is more about the basic pumping life of us. That's what mind energy is, not all these neurons. So it's talking, and I remember the base is like the physical necessity conditions for it to happen. It's not saying it happens in the base, but it's saying that this is what is necessary for this human function to happen.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on this 512-18-4? Okay, I think we should take a break. We're going to flip it. I'm going to do a little Mahayana parallel. It's not even a parallel. It's so more a little Mahayana flipping after break. So let's come back at 10:10 and just go get some more to drink or whatever. Take care.
Thanks.
I think a bunch of faces have popped back up. It's good to see you again. It's just such an interesting thing watching the pictures turn into like reality. So hi. I wanted to take a little time with this this grand chart that we just looked at, dividing ultimate reality into these boxes that, you know, line up and square up and make sense based on all that we've been studying. And I wanted to look at it in a little bit of a Mahayana perspective. You know, I kind of grew up I didn't grow up, but I mean, my Buddhist growing up was in a Zen context. And that's just largely because of random stuff, what was near my house. But I was very fortunate to have this teacher with this great appreciation for the breadth of study available and a lot of knowledge. And, you know, I have really kind of, I think, you know, I just have a very much of a sense of the compatibility of all teachings, if not, you know, the same angle of focus. So I wanted to bring in the Mahaprajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra. Is anybody familiar with this? Okay, it seems like not. Okay, it's a really basic Mahayana sutta, and I say sutra because I'm lapsing into that vocabulary. And this is said at like every service or, you know, occasion. And I'm gonna put it up so you can see it. Theoretically. Sorry. Okay. Sorry about all that. This is, you know, I say this every day. This is like a really basic thing. And it's really like if we took that chart that we have and we just went boom and flipped it over on the back, this is it. And it kind of goes to what Red Pine was saying about that the Mahayanas kind of took these concepts and used them to keep working on breaking down the self and breaking down constructed reality. And so, you know, we don't have to go through, this is a very old translation, but it's kind of the one that I know. And it says, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply the Prajnaparamita, perceived that all 5 skandhas are empty and was saved from all suffering and distress. Or this one says saved all from suffering and distress. So boom, you just start out with this, the khandhas are empty. That's the key thing that you start out with. And then it kind of expands on it. You know, a lot of people say, oh, the Abhidhamma, it doesn't deal with emptiness. And I'm like, are you kidding? The Abhidhamma is emptiness. It doesn't have to stop and say, hey, we're emptiness. But if you study it, you're seeing how everything works together. So I don't know what else you could ask for. So this goes on to say, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. It's just like emptiness is the khandhas. And so you kind of break it down that way. And they're all marked with emptiness. They do not appear nor disappear, are not tainted nor pure, do not increase nor decrease. And that kind of refers to what we were talking about before about, I think in the Chaitasikas, it's not like the Chaitasikas change, it's the composition within the momentary consciousness flow that is changing. So I think that's what that is referring to, the essentialness of the Dhammas. So then it goes into this big no thing. Therefore, in emptiness, no form, no feelings, no perceptions, no habit formations, no consciousness. You got your 5. No eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no color, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind. No realm of eye. Oh, let's stop there. There's a semicolon. You got your 12. Okay, you got the bases there. And then it goes on to the 18, but it puts a, and so forth in. No realm of eyes, and so forth, until no realm of mind consciousness. So that's the last bunch of blocks on the bottom of the chart. And it's just saying, and so forth, instead of spelling them out. So this is saying, therefore, no 5, 12, 18. And it does go on, this part, no ignorance and also no extinction of it, and so forth, until no old age and death, and also no extinction of them. That is saying no links of dependent origination. That's the 12 in there, which we will talk about in a while. So there's another important negation statement. It's actually, this is the 5, 12, 18, 12, and 4, instead of just the 5, 12, 18, and 4. Actually, if I was going to really make cliff notes for the Abhidhamma, I would do it this way, 5, 12, 18, 12, 4, because I think that's really important, but we're going to study it later. And then, you know, the real heartbreaker, no suffering, no origination, no stopping, no path. No before the 4 noble truths. Then it also says no cognition, also no attainment. So this is taking everything and just going no in front of it. And I have to tell you that I chanted this on a weekly basis for 3 years before I had any Buddhist teachings. So I was kind of left on my own. I just went to this place like learn to meditate here. And so, you know, we did a lot of sitting and then we chanted this and then I would go home. And I kind of kept a notebook for a while on what in the world I thought this thing meant. You know, for a long time, had no idea what it meant. Then I thought, oh, it's just getting you ready for death, I think is what it is, which is kind of true. But then as I started studying, I realized this was a very specific 5, 12, 18, like we just looked at with no in front of it. Now, no doesn't mean doesn't exist. It means it exists in emptiness. A quote from the Buddhist Zen teacher that I have is, negative language gives us leverage in regestalting. I like that. And that's kind of the point of this whole thing, is giving us this negative language so that we, you know, this is explicitly taking it to emptiness in our minds, pairing it in our minds with emptiness. Anything you pair in your mind with, like we said before, the two neurons will now fire together, emptiness and form, boom, we've paired them. So it's kind of like a training mantra in emptiness. There's just a great part here. With nothing to attain, the bodhisattva depends on prajna paramita, meaning the essential wisdom, and the mind is no hindrance. Without any hindrance, no fears exist. Far apart from every inverted view, the bodhisattva dwells in nirvana, here is how it's put. So then it goes on to say, in the three worlds, all Buddhas depend on prajna paramita and attain unsurpassed, complete, perfect enlightenment. And it goes on to say that this is the utmost mantra, the great bright mantra. And so proclaim it, that it says, gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi svaha. Beyond, beyond, I think, already having gone perfectly beyond. And as my Buddhist teacher says, bodhi, awareness, svaha, yay. So this is a big summary of kind of what I wanted to say is like Abhidhamma usage in another context. And it is flipped over, and it's not like it's saying, don't make lists, don't make analyses, you know, because there are lists and analyses right in there. It's just saying, see and seek the emptiness within it, the emptiness realization in every particle of it. It's saying, go through life with your emptiness fine-tooth comb. And that's kind of what our training and what our study of the Abhidhamma does for us. It's like a fine-tooth comb of emptiness. And so I think it's just interesting to see this, the and so forth. I want to show you something here where a lot of suttas and mantras do this, where there's a list and they just put an and so forth in the middle of the list. I want to show you one from the Visuddhimagga, just to give you a sense of how this can be. Okay, in the Visuddhimagga, there's a part where there's an abbreviation. I think this is this is just sort of for humor, but it's also very cool. Okay, he says, can you see that a little bit? Okay, thanks. There's an abbreviation from the I ... etc. to aging and death. Should be understood to represent the following sets of things alighted. Now in the Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra, we had 18 things, but in this is so Visuddhimagga to me. In this list, alighted, he means you're just sliding over a few things. Well, you should know that these are the lists that we're talking about. Now, these lists, though, you know, most of this material from what we've been talking about in terms of, you know, all these teachings about the mind, the states that occur in the doors of consciousness together with the doors and the objects, you know about those states, you know, aggregates, you know, the 6 doors, which are parallel to, you know, the 5 senses and mind that we think of, the 6 objects. This is really the same as the bases, the 6 kinds of consciousness. That's what you add to get to the elements. 6 kinds of contact we haven't exactly studied, but that's there. 6 kinds of feelings, you know, kinds of perception, Foolish. Okay, some of these 6s we haven't exactly done, but you know, you kind of know them. The 10 kasinas are the meditation objects, the 32 bodily aspects are the ways the body's broken down for that meditation, the 12 bases, 18 elements, we're back to this. 22 faculties we haven't gotten to, but we will. 3 elements, I'm not sure what that is, why there aren't 4. Anyway, so 9 kinds of becoming, not sure on that either. The 4 jhanas, this is the collapsing of what we've studied as 5. The 4 measureless states, immaterial attainments, 12 members of the dependent origination is what we're going to study, the links. So these are all things that we actually know, but if you were, you know, a super astute adept monk of back then, you would know when you read the I, etc., aging and death, that it was all of that stuff. And you would know all that stuff and it would be that available to you. So that's just to say what happens when you're reading suttas or mantras and they say, etc., watch out, because there's a lot of stuff in those and so forths and etceteras, but it's good to learn it because otherwise you're just saying and so forth and you don't know what you're referring to. But in that sutra from Mahayana that I showed you, you know, it really does, it surprises people in Zen that it is so Abhidhamma based and that knowledge of Abhidhamma is so important to saying that sutra that you can say every day without understanding. There's one other teaching I want to bring in from Mahayana, and that is from Eihei Dogen. Is there some familiarity with Dogen here? No, mostly I'm saying no's. Okay, he was a great Zen master, lived in like 1200 to 1253. One of the craziest, greatest spiritual writers I've encountered. Like when you read, he'll be like going off this way and then I'll slam you to the mat that way and then I'll pick you up and it's just like the writing is so dynamic. I can't even say, but I'm going to give you a sample. And he was Japanese and he went on a very perilous long journey to China and studied with some people there and then came back and reformed Japanese Zen, which had become, in his opinion and description, corrupt in terms of material things and simplicity of thinking. So simplicity of thinking he put an end to. But there's a quote I'd like to read that is, if I was going to pick out something on emptiness, interacting with our study, it's this. He wrote a bunch of, they're called fascicles. They're like spiritual essays and they're in a collection called the Shobo Genzo. And this fascicle is called Muchu Setsumu, which is translated as expounding a dream within a dream. And this translation is by Hee-Jin Kim. He wrote a book called Dogen on Meditation and Thinking. And it's about a steel yard. And I didn't know what this was, but I can kind of picture this from like old movies or something. A steel yard is a kind of scale that you hold, and then it's got like a steel bar, and on one side is one of those shallow bowls, and the other side is a weight that you can move out the bar to determine how to counterbalance with the shallow bowl. Like it's like those ones that are in doctor's offices that with that counterbalancing weight, but you hold it and you put something in the bowl and you use it that way. So that's what a steel yard is. So I'm just going to put this up and see if somebody wants to read a little Dogen, if it's possible. I tried to blow this one up. Would anybody be up for reading this?
I can try.
Thank you.
Quote from, I'm going to butcher his name, unfortunately. Dogen?
Yeah.
I'll just start reading. You
Yeah,
must investigate.
I
You must
think-
investigate the following thoroughly. Although the object, the steel yard, and its workings hang in empty space, if you do not bring about equilibrium, fairness is not materialized. Just as the steel. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna block away this bracket one because I think it's just added information, right? So just as itself hangs in emptiness, so does it accept things and lets them play freely in emptiness. Such is the expounding of a dream within a dream. In emptiness embodies equilibrium. Fairness is great principle of the Styliad. We weight emptiness and things, whether it be emptiness or form. But this is very deep stuff. Meet fairness. This is the expounding of a dream within a dream as well. In no case is there liberation that does not expound a dream within a dream. A dream is the entire great earth. The entire great earth is in equilibrium. For this reason, I don't know how to pronounce that word. Vertiginous.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Confusions of life are limitless. This is the attestation of a dream within a dream. We welcome them in faith and leave them in reverence. Wow, that's good stuff.
What do you think of it? What do you think?
The author, would you mind pulling that back up? Because I really like to see that one more time.
Sure. I'm really glad you read it really nicely, and I'm really glad that you did like it. Okay, here it is for you again. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So this is me. This is my interpretation of what he's trying to say. He, since this particular author at one point or the other has read Abhidhamma, and he has realized that what Abhidhamma is trying to say is nothing really exists. We just make things up as we go. There are certain things that exist. So I need to clarify my statement. There are certain things that exist, but they really don't exist in the way that we think they exist in. They're just compounds. They just group together. They arise, they cease so fast. We think something exists. So my interpretation is this notion of emptiness that he's referring to is that particular emptiness that when we see an object, let's say it's like a mouse or a keyboard or a cup or whatever, we see a cup, but the form of emptiness he's talking about is not necessarily the cup itself, but the components that build up the cup. I don't know if that makes sense. That's the way I see it. That's the way I read it. And the equilibrium he's talking about over here is these things coexist, whether I or notion of a self exists or not. Everything else still there. They exist in some sort of an equilibrium. It's just my mind making things up that breaks the equilibrium, more or less. So that's just my interpretation.
I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I'm really glad you read it. And actually I can see like just kind of the way you think, why you would sink your teeth into this. That's exactly what he's saying. Is like it. I feel that he is saying use emptiness, like actually how to use it, how to bring it alive. And I think that yeah, he is saying take this view. I love the end. We welcome them in faith and live them in reverence. That has a very nice tone to me, because he's not saying, you know, like that Visuddhimagga tone where it's like empty village and the robbers are coming and everything. He's not saying that. And I kind of appreciate that here. He's saying, of course we're deluded. Of course, you know, this is us, but, you know, have reverence for that. Have reverence for the truth of that and the emptiness of that. And I love that he says that. And he's saying, of course we're confused. We're just confused. That's the human way is confusion, but be there. But there's always the but. This scale though is a finely calibrated thing, and there is such a thing as equilibrium, and there is a principle of fairness, and those are very interesting words. And there's a lot about weighing things out, and that I think gets back to the study and the discernment that we try to acquire through this study. Dogen for sure knew his Abhidhamma. There are pieces where he starts doing lists, and he sometimes has one of those et ceteras in the middle, but he writes a lot about, I don't think a Zen monk of the 13th century would not know a good deal of Abhidhamma. And that's what's so interesting, because you can see the skeleton of it under even these very flowery essays that some people write. And his essays, I wouldn't describe as flowery, but more, they're just super dense and dynamic. He takes you all these different ways, but he remains respectful of our confusion as people, even though he invokes it constantly. I'm going to take this down so we could talk a little more as a group. But like he uses the verb, we weigh emptiness and things to meet fairness. He doesn't say we create fairness or we evaluate fairness or we define it. That is not up to us. I think that's kind of what you were saying, Toshita, too, that there's this equilibrium out there. No matter what we do with it, it's out there. There is some kind of balance or fairness. It's not up to us to say what it is, but it is up to us to try to live within it and to try to have some discernment. So I think I wanted to bring this as another way, but yeah, tell me what you're thinking about Dogen, about that piece, or about the difference between talking about emptiness explicitly, talking about emptiness by putting no in front of things, and not talking about emptiness, but showing it in a list of dynamic events. That was an impossible question. I can't kind of scale that down, but yeah, tell me, how this hits you.
I feel it's written for different type of personalities. Some people could take a no easier. Some people would take the Dogen's way much better.
Mm-hmm.
But for those people, they take a no, they might think Dogen's way is too soft.
Mm-hmm. That's funny. That's really true. And I had that reaction a lot when I was chanting that sutta, the Mahayana Sutta, like for 3 years without understanding it. I was like, this isn't fair. No this, no that. I want my eyes. I want to see things. I didn't get it.
So, some people need to be led gently, and others woken up quite abruptly.
Yes.
So yeah,
I
think you might find some resistance if somebody says, well, this is the way it is, rather than, here, let me show you, this is here's something that happens.
Yes.
And so it's maybe easier for some people to enter that way.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good point that you're both making, and it goes to the varieties of teachings of the Buddha, that there's so many that are very gentle and, kind of help the householder do this and that. And then there's some that are very cutting through. And that whole idea of, there's one place, and this is, I don't know where the sutta is, but I know where I read it is in Wings to Awakening, that book that I mentioned yesterday, by Thanissaro Bhikkhu. There's one place where the Buddha talks about 4 types of questions and how to answer them. And that there are some questions that you gently give information to fill in. And there are some questions that you kind of do slam the person to the mat and you say something that's the equivalent of, that's like a dumb question. And I forget the third one, but then the fourth one is you just walk away. You don't even engage with the question. I thought it was a very, very interesting sutta and had great implications for therapy work and for any interpersonal relationship. It's a really amazing thing. I could find that for you. I'll put that, let me write myself a note, because that's really, really cool sutta. And I will put that in the Slack if I can dig it up easily later. But it's true that that different language brings different things to different people. I actually have a thing I made about this. This is going to take some digging. Can you guys just not mind while I dig around in my computer for a second? Okay.
That's our break.
Yeah, you all get a lot of breaks watching me do this because I have this very cool thing, but I am not sure where it is. Okay. But I'm pretty sure I can find it. Yeah, dude, just relax, get some tea. Oh, here it is. Okay, since we're talking about this, I'm going to pull this up for you. I was thinking about the ways that Buddhism comes across to people, just since you mentioned it. And then I was thinking, wow, it's kind of like the 4 elements. So I made this chart, and it's called the 4 elements of Buddhist language, but don't forget the parentheses. All elements are in all study, just like all elements are in our body. Even if you focus on one element, like if you focus on the solidity, you still have the water element holding it together. You still have the air element if it moves, you know. So anytime you talk about the elements, you don't say there's just this one here and this one there. You talk about how they mix and blend. So I want to say the same thing about this. So you have the earth element is solid, and that would be the structural architectural presentation of Buddhist knowledge. And on the crazy blue lines, I have examples of where to find these kind of teachings. So here it says Abhidhamma instead of Abhidhamma. But so this is really where we are on the very earth element end of Buddhist teachings. And then this is kind of going from the structural to the less structural. Then there's a kind of a water element with that coherence. And to that, I put it in the didactic and repetitive stuff. And that's in a lot of the Nikayas, where in a lot of the Nikayas, the Buddha is simply, you know, listing Abhidhamma lists. You know, he's saying, look at blah, 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 but it's different because it's a person saying it. It's different than looking at the matrix. So that's kind of the water element to me. It kind of pulls things together. Then the movement air element is narrative and dialogue. And so that's in a lot of the Nikayas too, and the early suttas, where there's story and there's interaction, and that conveys a lot of, you know, information also. So in the story, there may be, you know, something about a monk who doesn't understand the 5 khandhas, and then the khandhas may be listed, but it's still a story. So here I also put in the Lankavatara Sutta. That's a kind of extensive Mahayana sutta. It's got a whole lot of stuff in it. And then the fire element is the creativity, and that's where you get the kind of poetic, fantastical stuff in Buddhist writing, like the Avatamsaka Sutta and the Vimalakirti Sutta, which is an early Mahayana sutra that I love. You know, and these you hear stuff like, and then, you know, 40,000 flowers made of crystals came down from the sky, and you know, they're just filled with this wild, beautiful stuff. The Avatamsaka Sutra, it is so, it's like a trip. You know, there's just pages and pages of like the columns made of the lotus blossoms, and then the pagoda, and I can't even do it all. They list, you know, for a whole paragraph, the different kinds of jewels that are in the pagoda columns, and it's just wild. So the Zen Buddhist koans, which are kind of more, I'm forgetting, there's Soto Zen and the other, Rinzai, a little more Rinzai study. If any of you have ever seen the koans are public cases. And what they are stories between a Zen teacher and a Zen student. And they start with an introduction, and then they have a little verse, and then they have a little crazy story that doesn't make any sense. And then they have a little wrap up, and you know, they're objects of study that are meant to cultivate like that scale and emptiness. They're meant to throw the scale off. So if you have something perfectly balanced, you're going with a koan, it's like, boom, it now tilts. So the koans are meant to throw your typical cognition off. And the stories are very wacky, and, you know, there's cows jumping through window shades, and, you know, saddles made of your father's jaw. There's just all kinds of really wild imagery in the koan. But I put them in between because they are a story. The koan is always a story between the teacher and the student, but they're filled with poetic, fantastical images. So these are just, I was just looking at the, to get to that point of the ways that we learn are all different. And so sometimes, we'll plug in one place much more easily than another. And sometimes that changes over the course of our study. I mean, I feel like in the course of my Buddhism, I've just been going from here, right up to the top, because I kind of did start in with the more like, I love the poetic, I relate to that. But underneath it, it just kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger about the structural base. And all elements are in all study. And I think it's really good to have a sense of all of these elements because they're just useful. Okay, I'm gonna take it down if you've seen it enough. Yeah, so that's kind of an aside, but I think it's really interesting, and it's another way. What I wanted to do with this, is kind of coming off the khandhas, coming off the ultimate reality chart, is to kind of bring it into a broader context of usefulness. And I think that's what this does. And we all, I think the point that David and Lisa brought in, and we all have our own ways of approaching. And it's good to, I think, watch for the ways that repel you, because they're teaching you something too. And I know a lot of my artist friends say, if you look at a piece of art and you go, ugh, that's horrible, that's a good piece of art because it really got to you, And so I think somewhat the same with study. If you find yourself backing off a kind of study, it's good to look at why on that too. But yeah, I'm curious if any of you have studied in other schools or have come across studies that do or don't sit well with you. I guess I'm also curious, how does Abhidhamma study sit with you so far?
I absolutely love it because it confuses me like the heck. So I'm serious. I accept that challenge. When something is confusing me, that means there's the way my mind works, at least there's a challenge. I like that challenge.
Yes.
So I'm invested in Abhidhamma. I've been invested in Abhidhamma for a while, so this is great.
Oh, that's so good. Now, I think that is a very like wholesome attitude, to not take your confusion as a repellent, but as an attraction, because it is true. It is true. Where you're confused is simply telling you the edge of your development. So that's very cool. And I'm really glad that it is, enlivening.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Tashita. Like, 6 years ago when I first came to Maba and sat in, and I stared at a wall for 40 minutes because I never meditated in my life. And then they went into a talk and I was like, I have no idea what just happened, but I'm going to figure it out. That's the way Abhidhamma is right now. There's a lot that makes sense. And then there's stuff that I'm just like, I have no idea what's going on right now. I'm just glad to be here. So I'm enjoying it. So
that's cool. Yeah, it requires, everything you explore in Abhidhamma, and when you get to the end, you kind of have to go back to the beginning because now you get it. And it's just like I just keep circling over and over it. I can't tell you, and it never stays still. You would think with all that structuralness, it would be like, okay, I've got this thing, I can move on to this thing. It doesn't stay still. It's amazing. It's really amazing.
This is my first time to learn about Abhidhamma. I felt it was like whatever I learned in the past from the sutra, they put everything in detail format. Goes into so detail and analyze a very organized way to tell you what it is, what I do, and right. It's so I find it very interesting.
Yeah. And that kind of suits you when you hear the details. You seem like the person that, when you hear the details, it fills it in for you, and then you kind of know where you are more.
Yeah, I feel like those terms I heard it before. I learned it somewhere before in the past, and
Yeah.
now it's coming back to talk a
Yeah.
little bit further.
Yeah, that's cool. Did you feel like the khandas were different today? Because I know you all have gone over them before, right?
Yeah.
Did it feel different today, like with all the background that we've put into them?
Mm, we did have some classes talking about kanda. At that time, did talk about because the nature of the kanda. So it is no self.
Yes.
But here it was said that I think it's just going into a lot more. So sinking in more.
Yes. Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it is funny to say the more detail you have, the more no self you can feel.
Mhm.
But it is true, like, and with the detail, like on the sense basis, the more you realize it's just so dynamic. And I guess that is what the emptiness point is. Yeah, any other thoughts? I think I have some other little bit here, but
So I would say that I went into this thinking I had done a little bit of review of Abhidhamma before, and I was like, kind of like, yuck, like to be honest, just because it was a lot of memorization, and I was like, oh man, I don't know. But I think now going through it in more detail with more structure in a class, not just free to flip through lists of stuff, and I can actually kind of analyze it. And some of these things that we're talking about, I say, oh, okay, I understand something I've experienced or something that I've read in other places like that. Just the Sariputra's, what he was talking about with no emptiness and no form, and all of that makes more sense in a way. And I'm seeing it in a way that I hadn't seen it before. So I appreciate that a lot. It has its use.
really cool. Well, your key word there is you can see it in your experience. And then it's, then it's incorporated. And then what you're doing is you're kind of replacing a construct of the self with an appreciation of process. And that's kind of the bottom line now. It's very, very analytic, but that synthetic part is coming too. It really talks more about how we've already seen a lot of the synthetic parts. So you have a list of the chittas and you have a list of the chaitasikas, but now you kind of understand how they, like that crystal, how they reflect off of each other and need each other. I mean, you already are seeing that huge dynamic. That is such an important, although tiny, that's such an important dynamic. So you already see that. So that's the synthetic aspect of it. If you don't learn the 121 types, it's hard to really get that synthetic piece. But if you don't get that synthetic piece, the 121 types is just a huge, cumbersome, awkward list. So it's very hard to study. You kind of have to move in between those two things. But the more fine-tooth, the more refined your appreciation of these processes gets, the more it naturally permeates your experience. And you're not going to stop and see a beautiful flower outside and go 17 steps and name them. We can't do that, but you have that in you now, and it has permeated your way of thinking and experiencing. And so that's how we really do hope to incorporate it. Any other thoughts? Somebody?
I just said thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, because I think another Dogen fascicle is called Bendoa, and I forget the whole translation, but it has to do with wholehearted practice. And it's all about how, like, if you don't come at Buddhism with a whole heart, you're going to miss the boat. And maybe that wholehearted also refers to the mind base. I never thought about that, but wholehearted is also with your full experience in mind and all the aspects of it. So what I'm going to say is that You are some wholehearted students. This is a great wholehearted group. So thank you so much. Why don't we take a break now and go feed the rest of our body and relax and look at some flowers or whatever. So in the afternoon, we're going to look at what I call the diagnostic manual, but it's where it talks about all the different kinds of hindrances and problems we have and all the different kinds of aids to enlightenment that we have. So that's kind of back, we are still on a very much more human experiential scale, but it's really, really useful to look at that. So have a really good break, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.